Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I'm thrilled to have Dr. Joey Munoz on the show. With a Ph.D. in nutrition sciences and a passion for coaching, Joey's journey into the world of health and fitness wasn't always straightforward. From struggling as a student to being overweight, Joey's unique path has shaped his perspective on nutrition and training. Joey brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table, from busting common myths to navigating the complex landscape of social media misinformation. In today's episode, we'll explore Joey's journey, his approach to debunking nutrition myths, and how he helps his clients achieve their health and fitness goals. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn from one of the brightest minds in the field. As a reminder, online coaching is what we do at Revive Stronger. It's what I spend the majority of my time doing in helping clients drop fat, gain muscle, take a bodybuilding stage, and much more. What sets us apart is we keep things very personal through video check-ins, and we don't work with too many people because we want to invest as much as we can into each person, and our clients aren't just numbers to us. So if you're interested in joining our team, know that our coaching is always linked in the bio, so you can learn more there and even book a consultation and talk with your coach directly. But without further ado, let's welcome Joey to the show. So Joey, you have a PhD in nutritional sciences, but that wasn't always the route. You didn't know that was the route you were going to go down, as far as I'm aware. And
Not at all.
yeah, I'd love to hear a bit about your background. I think
Sure.
the audience would love to hear about it. We have a lot of coaches who probably would look up to someone like yourself for sure, and how you got to where you are. And they, I think, would be inspired from your story, because I know you kind of weren't the best student at one point. I'll let you kind of dig into that a bit more. And obviously, as a child, you were somewhat overweight as well. And that kind of led you in this somewhat of this direction. So I'd love to hear a bit about your background and
Sure.
how you got where you are.
Yeah, you really did your research, Steve. I'm impressed.
For sure. Yeah, I
Um,
wanna know about the person before I bring them
yeah,
on. And so
no,
it's
that's
it's
great,
always
man.
great.
So I'll start, I guess, way back with how my passion for health and fitness even started. Since you mentioned me being overweight as a young kid, which I was. I was actually very overweight. My earliest memory of starting to focus on nutrition and exercise was a very unhealthy experience at first, which resulted in many unhealthy behaviors that lasted years. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that, right? Um, I remember being, I think I was around 12 or 13 years old, and my mom taking me into a doctor's appointment, and the doctor telling me that I was pretty much 2% body fat away from being obese. I, I clearly remember those words. And that's kind of where my origin story begins when it comes to dieting. Like, my mom has always really cared about health and fitness. She's always really cared about body image. And I know that her intentions were pure, but she didn't really understand what sort of negative impacts can arise from putting a young kid on a very strict diet. Not only a very strict diet, but one that, like, scientifically doesn't make a ton of sense, right? And then using exercise almost as, when I was younger, it wasn't exercise as punishment, but it was, I had to exercise to earn certain things. So it started to develop a really weird relationship with exercise too. I remember for Christmas, I wanted a PlayStation. My mom was like, I'll get you the PlayStation if you do 2 hours of whatever cardio based exercise. And, like, again, the intentions weren't bad, right? And inherently not trying to cause harm, but those things can cause negative behaviors later on in life, right? So that's kind of where my health journey began. I was really overweight. And when my mom put me on these strict diets, it was pretty much just like a no carb diet. I wasn't really allowed to enjoy many of the stuff that I typically did enjoy. And to be honest, like, my memory's a bit fuzzy. I was really young, right? So it was really strict dieting and a ton of exercise. And the exercise thing never bothered me because both my parents have always been really active. I grew up going to the gym with my mom regularly. My dad would come home and, like, do push-ups after work. So I saw my parents exercising, and I never hated exercise. So for me, like, doing the exercise was a big deal, but it became like very intense, right? Like, I was doing a ton of cardio. I was dieting really strictly. And as a result, I did lose a ton of weight. By the time I was 14, I was pretty skinny. I had lost all of the excess weight that I had when I was younger. But then I started realizing, like, even though I've lost a ton of weight, still didn't feel happy with my body, right? And there were a number of reasons for that. And then two, I still had not still, I was still young. I had a ton of misconceptions when it came to nutrition and exercise, right? So I remember all throughout like my teenage years, I had a ton of anxiety when it came to food. Um, and I would mask it in the sense of like, I'm a bodybuilder, right? And what I mean by that was like I would always try to eat clean, whatever that meant. For me at the moment, that meant eating very bland food, right? Like bodybuilding style food, plain chicken breast, just some veggies, and like very strict dieting that's unnecessary. And when I mentioned that I have had a ton of anxiety around food, what I mean is that anytime there was some sort of social situation, whether it was a birthday party or a celebration with family or it was the holidays, I'd feel really anxious, specifically just about food choices, right? I almost like didn't want to attend things because I didn't want to feel tempted to eat certain foods because I thought that those foods were inherently fattening. And to add to that, anytime I did go to those events, I felt like I didn't have any self control. And so then I would feel bad. And so then for the next couple of days, I would do hours of cardio to try to sweat it off, right? Like things that a lot of people probably listening, I'm not sure if your audience is more focused on bodybuilding or whatnot, but a lot of people fall into that sort of cycle, right? A lot of young people fall into that sort of cycle. And so it definitely wasn't healthy. Um, And then I guess it started to transition more. I really do think knowledge is power and education is incredibly important, right? I work with clients when I see one of the biggest hurdles that people encounter is the fact that they just don't have basic knowledge when it comes to physiology and nutrition, right? Like you wouldn't fall for a lot of the diet bullshit you see online if you understood how physiology works, right? So there's some baseline level of understanding that's necessary to not fall for a lot of these things. And so for me, things really started to transition slowly when I just started to become more educated in the field. It all started with YouTube, which you and I were talking about earlier. Right. I started watching like Layne on YouTube and started learning about the importance of energy balance and how food choices are important, but they're definitely not as important as energy balance when it comes to body composition. I started learning about hypertrophy specific training because before I was just doing a ton of cardio and I was lifting weights, but I was definitely prioritizing cardio way more than lifting. Part of me being unhappy with the way I looked was one, I was really young. You can't be jacked at 14 years old unless you have great genetics. Because there are some young kids, man. I remember some kids football team. I was like, dude, you look like a grown man. But all jokes aside, it was the fact that I was doing the wrong type of exercise that wasn't contributing to the body composition that I wanted to develop, and I had all of these myths around nutrition. So when I started consuming all this content, things really changed. Again, followed people like Layne Norton, started learning about nutrition, started following people like, let's see how far back you go on YouTube. Did you ever watch Chris Jones and Physiques of Greatness?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was he was the bread and butter with Matt
yeah.
Ogus. Everyone
He
knows
was,
I'm
yeah.
a big fan of Matt
Him,
Ogus, but
Matt Ogus, and
Hodge
Scooby.
twins,
Do you remember
Scooby.
Scooby?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
I remember
Hodge twins.
Scooby.
Those were the guys that kind of like made me really passionate about lifting. And Chris Jones is like he had a hypertrophy program that he was selling for $40. That was the first time I ever spent any money on a workout program online. And it was definitely not the training program, but it worked, right? A ton of volume, a lot of hard work. And that's when I really transitioned from like doing a ton of cardio to doing minimal cardio to lifting to now having a healthier relationship with nutrition. But even then, like I still, I still had very unhealthy behaviors. So this is early undergraduate career, maybe even all throughout my undergraduate career. I really went through like pretty drastic cycles of gaining weight and losing weight. And I would gain 20, 30, 40 pounds in a couple of months, which for me was pretty drastic. And it was because I was dirty bulking, right? And so there were still a lot of misconceptions that I didn't understand. And it's funny because I thought I knew a lot more. And I was like, I don't follow these diets anymore. Like, this is what I do now. And like, this is also equally silly, right? And so I would do this dirty bulking stuff, gain 30 pounds. And then when I would cut, I would still do it in a very restrictive way because it was just like my experience growing up, right? So I would do A ton of fasted cardio if I was cutting. I would take fat burners, 500 milligrams of caffeine first thing in the morning, fasted. I would still cut out all carbs because it was the easiest way to just drop calories. I didn't want to cut out any protein sources. So I would just do really, really low carb. And I mean, it worked for losing weight, right? I would lose weight, I would gain weight, but I never really developed my body the way that I wanted to. And I still like, again, I think you could argue that those aren't the healthiest behaviors from a psychological standpoint either, right? Even though at the moment I didn't feel that way, like when I reflect on it, I'm like, yeah, it's probably not best to fall into these massive cycles of gaining a ton of weight and then losing a ton of weight. And so then going into my graduate career, I think this whole thing has been a slow transition, right? And this is something that I talk to my clients about too. It's like if you're on a journey to improve your body and your health, you're going to start seeing some physical improvements pretty quick, right? In a couple of months if you start focusing on things. But to be in a place where you really feel comfortable with your body, and you really live what you consider a healthy lifestyle that's sustainable, I think that really does take years. And have an actual psychological shift in the way that you view your relationship with health and fitness, right? And what I mean by that is, to be completely honest, my body hasn't changed a ton from that time point till now. But I would say that everything I do now and the psychology that I have around the things that I do is way more sustainable. What do I mean by that? Before, I had to exercise. Now I enjoy exercise. Before, I had to eat healthy. Now I enjoy eating healthy. And I've talked about this before. I don't necessarily know what the switch was, and I don't even know if there was a switch. I just think it's been a slow transition. Like the longer I do these things, the more of like a holistic approach I have to health and fitness, right? And part of it was really when I was in graduate school and diving deep into like nutritional research and seeing what sorts of behaviors healthy populations across the world have. I started really realizing that being healthy is not about following a specific diet. I think that's the number one thing that people need to understand, especially in the context of nutrition, is not about following a specific diet. And we can use common sense for this. There are populations across the planet that are incredibly healthy and their diet looks very different, right? What there is are certain commonalities or behaviors that are similar across all populations, right? So we can talk about specific nutrients, fiber, et cetera, lifestyle, physical activity. And then that's when I really started focusing on having a more behavior focused approach to health and fitness. And I was like, when it comes to my nutrition, like, hey, if I'm going out to eat somewhere, let's say I'm going out to a birthday and I want to have a ton of cake, like I'm going to make sure I get my protein and get some veggies in before. So it's well balanced. Like this is really what matters. And I think that's one thing that has really helped me shift my mindset with how I view nutrition. And then from a body composition perspective, it's just getting older, you start to realize that other things matter a little bit more, right? I'm married now. I have a son. I have a career. I have a business to run. Like there's a lot of things in my life that are really important. And I'm not going to say that my fitness and my physique aren't important because for me, that's honestly one of my priorities. I make time every day to go work out, etc. But like the way I look is not as important, even though I still really care about improving body composition, but it's more because I enjoy doing so. Whereas maybe when I was younger, like that was the primary focus. Like, right, what does my body look like? And if it doesn't look a certain way, I'm unhappy. And so it's just been a slow transition, man. I try to help and educate my clients on this, but it's a tough thing to talk about. Anyways, that was my personal story. I think you wanted to know a little bit about my educational background too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was great to just hear you take us through that journey because I at least recognize a lot of the things you talked about there. I can remember. So for me, it was like drinking alcohol. And then the next day, rather than like, I wouldn't make myself sick and purge, but I'd purge via exercise. I'd have to go on a long run to burn off those calories because I knew that was a bad thing that I'd done. It's such a bad mentality surrounding food. And similar to
Yeah.
you going to social events and things, like I'd want to bring my own food or abstain from certain foods. And I think you put it so well where it's just time learning the
Mhm.
principles behind what drives like body composition changes and just practicing it more and more. You get more and more comfortable, more confident in yourself. And yeah, slowly you get a healthier mindset around it. And it's so great that you can, I feel the same way with my clients where you can kind of expedite that journey and you can recognize the poor, maybe thought processes and relationships they have in certain areas, and you can pull them out on it and be like, let's improve that. Like, let's not just leave that
Yeah.
there. Let's try and improve it. So, yeah, in regards to the educational background, I know even I think you started a degree, right? And then you kind of shifted even within
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I just thought
I'll
that was
touch
really
on that.
interesting.
Yeah. I quickly wanted to mention, follow up there on something what you mentioned regarding alcohol. I too used to drink a ton in undergrad. I think everybody does in college, right? Like you go out to party, I would say on the weekends, but sometimes it's also throughout the week and you're drinking 3, 4 times a week. And luckily for me, after college, I stopped doing that. And then some people after college, that just carries on, right? And this is where I think alcohol is a perfect example to depict this, because the shift for me has really been from like trying to look a certain way as the primary outcome to now just living a certain way, which I consider as living a healthy lifestyle, right? And living a healthy lifestyle involves more than just what you eat and what type of exercise do you do, right? Like alcohol, sleep, stress management. It's all influencing your overall health. And the funny thing is that like the less I focus on what my body looks like, and what I mean by that is like focusing on strict dieting and doing tons of long workouts. Like the more I focus on just living a healthy lifestyle, the better my body actually looks. Right. And so when it comes to alcohol, and I say this with clients too, it's like I used to for only eat protein throughout the day so I could have 1,000 calories worth of alcohol that night, right? And it's such a silly way of thinking about it. And it's funny because I can remember clearly when I was in that position, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, right? I was like, hey, calories are all what matters. I need to get my protein. I get my protein in. If I have 1,000 calories, I can just drink tonight. It's like, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. Not really understanding the negative impacts of alcohol on body composition. But beyond that, just like that is not a healthy way of living, right? And so I try to tell clients like, hey, if you are um, improving your diet, but like still going out to eat and drink multiple times per week, like that's not living a healthy lifestyle, right? And then maybe not hyperfixating on your diet right now, but really thinking about ways that you can limit alcohol consumption would have an overall more positive impact on what you're trying to do. But anyways, we'll leave that there. We'll talk about school. So I, growing up, was never a good student at all. Um, I think a lot of that truly stemmed from two things. I think one is what's the term? What's the term for when you like mix letters and numbers? Um,
It's not, that's not dyslexia, is it?
Dyslexia,
No.
yes.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes. So I think part of it was undiagnosed dyslexia at a very young age. I remember clearly having such a hard time with like, and even sometimes now I do it on a math test. Like if it's like 51.4, I'll put like 54.1, right? Very small issues, but I would do it very frequently. And anyways, I remember as a young kid that impacting me negatively and then like thinking I'm not a good student or whatnot. I think that was one aspect of it. And then two, I had a ton of issues with family related stuff growing up. And I think just performing poorly in school, not paying attention in school, I would draw instead of pay attention to class. I would just draw for hours, was my way of like rebelling as a really young kid. And as a result, I didn't do well in school, especially elementary school and middle school. Um, because I don't know, man, like kids are so susceptible to their environment, right? Like it's really sad because we don't have control over those things. And like now having a son, sometimes like if he's falling asleep in my arms or something, I just look at him and I reflect on things about my childhood. I'm like, man, it's really sad the things that some kids have to go through because they don't have any control, right? Anyways, I went through some stuff when I was a kid that I think impacted me academically and impacted my behavior in a not positive way. I would rebel a ton. I would try to always be class clown. I would always be trying to get attention in school. So it didn't work out in my favor, right? Thankfully, towards the end of high school, the university that I went to had a program for first generation college students, which I was because neither of my parents went to college here in the US. And so the standards to get in were substantially lower. And it's a pretty good university. So I applied. They were taking in minorities. I'm Hispanic. My family's from Cuba. And so I got into the program. That's how I got into into the university, thankfully, because of this program. And for me, it was like, if I don't go to this university, because it was the only university I wanted to go to, I'm just not going to go. So thankfully I got lucky and I got in. And initially, I wanted to do a lot of different things. In high school, I liked math. For a while, I thought I could be a math major. I've always been very passionate about realistically, my personality is like, I'm passionate about skill-based things. So if it's like video games or playing an instrument or chess, I love chess. Like anything where you could put time into it and actually improve, I become obsessed. So at the time, I was obsessed with playing the saxophone. I was in the high school marching band. I was in the high school jazz band. I would I had two music classes at school. I would play music at school for 2 hours every day, and then I would go home and play for another 2 or 3 hours. And so I went when I went to college, I wanted to continue that, and I wanted to be a music major for a while. And then I remember having a conversation with my mom, and she was like, "You're going to be broke if you're a music major. You can always do it as a hobby." And I was like, you're right. And it wasn't that simple of a conversation, but I started realizing like that wasn't the route I necessarily wanted to go down professionally. And so then for me, I was like, well, what else am I passionate about? Well, I like body composition and training and all this stuff. So what should my major be? My major should be exercise science because that was the closest thing. And I started as an exercise science major. And as you know, I got kicked out of being an exercise science major because this is where the irresponsibility came in. Like growing up, I had a really, really strict childhood, like when I was in high school and stuff. So it originated in 10th grade. I was 14, 15 years old. I got caught smoking weed. And then since then, the rest of high school was like literally like I was in prison. I'm not exaggerating. My mom would take me to school, pick me up from school, and I wasn't allowed to hang out with friends. I didn't have a phone. I wasn't allowed to do anything. So it was super strict. So now I'm going to college and I have all the freedom in the world. I live 8 hours away from home and I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. So my sense of responsibility was non-existent. So I was just partying too much, man. And there was this one exercise science class that was a seminar, and it was once a week on Mondays at 8 in the morning. I never woke up before 1 p.m. So I just could not make it to the class. And the way that class worked was if you missed more than 2 times, it was just pass fail, you just didn't pass. And I did that 2 semesters in a row. And as a result, I was forced to switch my major. And that was towards my sophomore year. And so I was like, what's the closest thing to exercise science? Nutrition. And so I just chose nutrition because of that, man. And around the same time too, I was maturing a little bit emotionally. I was like, man, I should really buckle down and focus on these things. And truth be told, when I started taking classes like metabolism courses, the science of nutrition, biochemistry courses, I was fascinated by the way the body works, and I just liked it. And I think part of it was that like I could improve my nutrition and my body comp. So it was somewhat of a selfish reason why I was so interested in those things. But I just started to naturally excel at school a little bit more. Another personality trait of mine is that if I'm not interested, I don't care, regardless of the repercussions. Like it could be you fail out of school. If I'm doing stuff that I'm not interested in, I don't care. So when I was actually interested, I really cared. I have a, like I was mentioning, I have a fairly obsessive personality. So if I don't care, if I don't like it, I don't care at all. And if I like it, I care too much. Right. So that was essentially towards my junior, senior year of college. And then I remember I was studying in the library for an organic chemistry course. It was towards the end of maybe junior year, beginning of senior year. I was like, man, I can't really do much with a bachelor's degree in nutrition. All my friends wanted to go to medical school, and I was like, I can't go to medical school because I messed up too much my freshman and sophomore year of college. I'd have to do like another year of school. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to go for my master's in nutrition because I like it. Actually, that's incorrect. I was more focused on food science, okay? Because there's a nutrition and food science major combined for the undergraduate level. And for those that don't know what food science is, the difference between nutrition and food science, to put it simply, is nutrition is the study of the interaction between the food and right, and food science is studying the food itself. So, like, what's the chemical composition of the food? What makes the food tastier? What makes the food more shelf stable? What are like the professors at our university used to study a lot of the allergens in particular foods and trying to identify what proteins cause allergies. So it could be studying anything about the specific food, right? If you think about most of the food products that you buy, the reason why foods are shelf stable is because of food science. The reason potato chips taste really damn good is because of food science, right? So that's what I was more inclined toward. And the reason why I was inclined toward that is because I've always had a somewhat entrepreneurial spirit and I wanted to develop my own food product. And I was like, I need to study food science to be able to do this. Now, what I didn't understand is that when you're in graduate school, you do research. I didn't know what research was. I just thought professors taught classes. And boy, was I wrong, because like the majority of what they do is research. And two, I also didn't understand that you don't really have full freedom to do the research that you want to do. You actually do a lot of the research that your professor does. And there were no professors in our department who focused on product development, right? And I remember talking to one professor and I was like, I really want to, as part of my master's thesis, develop a food product, a high protein food product that's shelf stable. I thought I was going to use my master's to then sell a food product afterwards. And the professor was just like, you can do that, but you're on your own. You have to figure out your own funding. You have to, and I didn't know what any of that meant. And I was like, well, what's my other option? He's like, well, if you want to be in this lab, you're going to be studying the allergens in almonds and other tree nuts. I was like, man, I don't want to do that at all. And so then I met the professor that I actually worked with for my master's and PhD um, during a graduate level vitamins and minerals course that I was taking. Him and I got along really well. He was like, hey, you should do your PhD with me. And at the time, I didn't know what a PhD was. Again, I didn't really know what research was because I was just in the graduate program for a couple of months at this point. What I didn't know was that school was really expensive. So I had taken out like, I think it was like $25,000 worth of loans for my first year of my master's. And I remember telling him like, I would love to, but school is too expensive and I'm not going to go that much in depth for a degree that I don't really know what I'm going to do with. And he said, oh, no, you've got it all wrong. If you do a PhD, we pay your tuition and we pay you a stipend to teach a class as a TA. And that was like the only factor I took into consideration. And I was like, if that is true, then yes, I will do a PhD. And so then I did the PhD and the rest of it is history. Um, how I transitioned from academia into, which is mainly coaching and owning my own coaching business, is somewhat of a story that comes full circle too. Layne Norton has always been somebody who I've really looked up to in the fitness industry. When I was doing my master's, I remember I think I was driving home for like spring break or something like that. And I was listening to his old podcast. I forget what it was called, like Physique Radio or something like that.
Yeah, I would listen to that podcast as well. It
Yeah.
was something like
And
Physique Radio.
yeah. And Sohee Lee was his co-host at the time. And they were having a conversation about just like pursuing your dreams. And if you want something, like reach out to people, don't be shy, ask for what you want, etc. So I was like, that one episode inspired me to reach out to him when I was doing my master's. And I was like, hey man, is there any way I could be involved in anything that you're doing? I want my career to be the same thing that you made your career to be. Not knowing what online coaching was at all. And at the time, he gave me an opportunity to write articles on his website back when blogs were a really big thing. So I was writing articles for biolayne.com. And I remember like, that was so cool to me. I was like, man, this one guy who I've looked up to and read all his articles on his website, like now I'm writing articles on that website. That's so cool. And then when I started my PhD, especially towards the latter end, when I was like really focused on my dissertation, I just like didn't have the bandwidth to write those articles. So I told him I had to stop and I was just focused completely on my PhD. And for a while, I thought I wanted to be a professor and be in academia. And then towards the end, when I realized I didn't, I was like, man, what am I going to do? Let me reach out to Layne again. And so I reached out and I was like, listen, it's been a while since we last spoke. We always had a good relationship. I always, wrote good articles and was timely with everything. And so I think he had a good impression of who I was. And I told him I was finishing my PhD and I didn't want to continue in academia. And I was like, is there any way I could be involved with you in what you do? And at the time, he was in the conceptualization phase for REPS, which is his research review. And so I thought that when I finished my PhD, I was going to be writing for REPS. So like writing research reviews for a research review that's not academic, right? I was like, that's a really cool opportunity. At the same time, I told him I wanted to be involved in the supplement industry. So I became involved with Outwork Nutrition, which I'm still involved with. And I started doing social media stuff. My first, and it's funny because as I'm telling the story, I'm remembering things. My first like position was like doing all of Layne's social media content, a lot of the writing, right? So a lot of the research review behind the posts. I was just like compiling studies, putting the findings together in a simple to read format so he can then use that to put on social media. I was doing the same for his ex-wife, Holly. So that was my first introduction to social media, is like doing content. And I wasn't even doing content at the time at all. And then doing content for Outwork Nutrition as well. So I went from being a PhD student to like a content creator for not my own content, not understanding how content creation works. Um, but then I came down to Tampa, which is where I live now. I met with him and Holly at the time. And it was really Holly who asked me if I've ever considered online coaching. And I was like, I don't even know what online coaching is, but I used to be a personal trainer. And I like working with people. And the funny thing is that coaching was all about sharing knowledge. And I was like, and I have a lot of knowledge, so I could help people. And part of it is knowledge, but a big part of it is just not knowledge, right? It's just like, how do you relate to people and all that? So anyways, man, that's kind of my beginning journey of like getting into coaching online. That was probably about 4 years ago now. That's when I started my social media stuff too. And then one thing, again, another personality trait of mine is that like if I commit to something, I just do it. Like there's no emotion associated with it, which can be positive and negative in different aspects, right? But when it comes to like content creation, it's been really helpful because I've created at least 3 pieces of content every single week for the past 4 years without fail, right? So that's helped me with my success a ton on Instagram because like consistency really does matter. Started my own podcast, worked with Layne's coaching company for about 3 years, and I left a year ago because the vision for what I had or for what I wanted to do is different than what they're doing over at BioLane. I want to develop more group coaching and membership style stuff and develop courses and focus on a slightly different population than what they're doing. And so I decided that it was time for me to do my own thing. That was a year ago. And I promise you guys that are listening, I'll stop talking very shortly. And that's pretty much where we got to today, man. Now I do all of the same stuff, but I do it for myself. I just launched my coaching membership last month, and I'm about to relaunch at the beginning of May. It's all about building, it's 2 pillars: hypertrophy training and developing healthy habits around nutrition. So all the stuff that I or talking about earlier with my origin story is the stuff that I'm trying to help people develop with the membership. It's like we need to exercise and we need to have a healthy lifestyle. When it comes to exercise, I'm extremely biased towards hypertrophy training, especially for people who are older, like super low injury risk, improved muscle mass, which improves glycemic regulation, cognitive function, etc., improve bone density. You look better. Like it's just a win-win overall, right? And I'm not against cardio. Actually, habits that we have in our habit program is like to do cardio regularly. But I really want people to prioritize hypertrophy training. So we've developed a ton of programs there. And then everybody that comes into our membership also gets enrolled in our healthy habits program. And our philosophy there is that we've outlined about 15 habits, and you just get a new habit every week. And at the beginning of the week, you also get education on the habit, because as I mentioned earlier, I think education is incredibly important. So like the first week, it's on protein consumption. You get some education on what is protein, what are high protein sources, why is protein important, how much protein should you be consuming, and you get like recipe packs and stuff like that for the particular habit too. So that's the one thing that I'm really focusing on at the moment that I'm super excited about. But yeah, man, that's my story.
Really cool to hear all of that. And as we were saying off air, like we're not too divergent in terms of age. I'm a little bit older than you, and I didn't go down the PhD route or anything, but I certainly sometimes look back and I'm like, oh, what if I decided something different here? But like I've had big events in my life that have taken me down a certain direction, and it sounds like you had the same. It's like, what if that didn't happen? Like
Yeah.
you said, your environment can be negative, but also positive in many ways, and kind of creates the person you are today. So it is super interesting to hear about everything you've gone through. And I think something you highlighted a few times is this kind of obsessive nature that you have. And
Mhm.
I think that probably is largely why you've kind of got to where you are, because I think you've just consistently worked really hard. Like it's not by chance. Like lots of things have maybe been not, I don't know if it's luck, but they were right time, right place. But because you worked at it, like you had the opportunity with Layne, but you did a really good job. If you didn't do that, maybe you wouldn't have got to where you
Yeah.
are here today. So I think as a take home for people, like, hey, work hard at the things you're doing. Like working hard is never a bad idea for sure.
Dude, it's so funny because I used to think it was so cliche. Give me 1 second here, and sorry if this interrupts the episode. My speaker's about to die, and I just need to put it on the
No
charger.
worries.
Should have done that before we started. All right. See, we're good. Yeah, I used to think it was so cliche, the whole like concept of like what's the phrase? Luck is when opportunity meets hard work or something like that. And then like the whole idea of like if you really love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. That's bullshit, but it does make work way more enjoyable, right? Like I was saying earlier, I've had jobs before, and I jokingly say I am the world's worst employee because if I don't like what I'm doing, man, good luck trying to motivate me at all to do the work at all. I will put in the least amount of effort possible to just get by because I don't know, that's just the way I'm wired. But for example, when I'm excited about something, so when it comes to this membership, like one thing that I'm trying to learn a ton about now and I'm being a little bit obsessive about is marketing because I don't know anything about business. And I've realized I thought that if you have a large audience on Instagram and you say, hey, I have this one thing that I sell, that people would just buy it. And I realized that some people do, but that's not really the way that business works. There's a reason why there are marketing departments. I'm like, man, maybe I should really learn about marketing because I'm confident that I have a good product and a good service. Now I need to know how to market it, right? And so one of the things that I'm going to be testing is I'm going to be doing a webinar slash masterclass at the end of this month. And yesterday, no joke, with the exception of my workout, I worked from like 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. doing my client check-ins, and then the rest of the day was working on the webinar. And it really did not feel like I worked 12 hours, right? It kind of just went by. And by the way, I don't always do that. I rarely do that, but it just goes to show that when you're really excited about something, it's kind of easy to work hard, right? Because it's not hard work. Like you're just enjoying what you're doing. And so I know maybe it can't be like that for every single person, but I think people oftentimes maybe settle a bit. I don't know. I hate talking about these things, man. I really don't like when there are content creators that are like, don't settle, quit your job, work hard, chase your dreams, because so much of it is environmental, right? I
Mhm.
recognize that I'm here, yes, because of the opportunity. Like I created some of these opportunities and I feel like I have a good personality to create relationships with people and network. Um, but one part of that is genetic, just like who I am and how I relate to people. Not everybody's like that. And two, a lot of it has been luck as well, right? Like I've been in the right place at the right time. Like I mentioned, the university I went to had a program for first generation college students. I was lucky. My professor just asked me if I wanted to do a PhD. I was kind of lucky, you know, like Layne is a nice person and he's receptive to students. I was lucky because I also reached out to other people and nobody answered. Now, that's also not to tell people that like you don't have any autonomy because that's the other extreme. And I don't believe that at all. The sad part is that there are people that put in a ton of effort, a ton of hard work and fail. And that's the harsh truth, right? Now, the thing is, if you don't put in the hard work and you don't do any of it, you're definitely not going to get there, right? So might as well at least try.
This is whenever I hear these discussions on like a business format, they just end up really mirroring like bodybuilding basically and body composition. It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you've got a certain deck of cards, your genetics, your dealt, and then it's how you play with them that matters in the long run. And
yeah.
so it's the same here. Like everyone's got a certain deck of cards, business wise or whatever it is, and you just have to play with them as best you can and do your best. But certainly, it's considering how long you've been in the industry, which isn't ages. I guess you're a personal trainer, but actually on social media, then like your Instagram account, like it's actually really grown tremendously well. So you've definitely done something right in that regard. And it's awesome to see, by the way, your content's great.
Thank you, man. The growth has been specifically the past 8 months. Um, so one of the things that I was most anxious or scared about when it came to leaving Team BioLane was, will I have continual success on social media? because one of the big benefits of being associated with Layne is that he would shout us out frequently and he would share our posts. And I worked with him for 3 years. And in 3 years, I went from 0 followers to about 73, 75,000. And I was like, man, you know what? If I take a hit in my growth, it's okay. And the first month I left, I went from like 70,000 to like 120,000. It just, dude, I don't know what it was. Like, I think that it was the right environment. I started making slightly different content, and my social media following has almost at this, no, has tripled at this point in just 8 months to a little over 260,000. And on average, it's growing between like 500 and 1,000 people per day. Dude, I haven't really done much different, which is funny
What's the
because,
silver bullet? All the
well,
all
the only
the
difference I
coaches are
have
asking.
made is I'm also very analytical. So I try to really focus on picking up on patterns, right? And like I said, I read books about these things, and like my obsessive nature, there was a period of time that I was really obsessed about learning about social media growth. So I was following all the gurus on social media that teach you about growth and learning about what content hits and what content, and learning how to tell a story and learning how to write a hook and learning how to be energetic. Like, so I want to preface this because you were talking about like the hard work, right? Like, yes, I've had luck, but I've put in a ton of time and effort in this, right? So people listening, it's like, I feel like oftentimes we see the end result and we're like, oh, that person's like
Tip
lucky
of the
to be there. It's
iceberg.
like, yes, they are lucky to be there. I'm lucky that I wasn't born 500 years ago. I was born today. I was born in the US. I wasn't born poor. Like, there's a lot of luck that goes into that. But given the cards that I was dealt, like you mentioned, I've put a ton of effort in, right? So when it came to social media, I literally studied social media, man. And I started picking up on patterns. Like the main tip that I received that I think had the biggest impact on my growth was the atmosphere on social media always changes. So if you're trying to figure out the type of content that hits, that's the wrong strategy because every couple of months it changes, right? Like there are changes in the algorithm, there are changes in what people consume, like there's changes in what's popular. What is consistent though is that there are particular types of content that do well during different periods of time. So what I started doing is looking at my colleagues that I respect and seeing which of them are growing more than others, right? Because in our space, there are a ton of people that are doing really good educational content. And for some reason, some people grow a lot quicker than others, even though the actual quality of the information being shared is equal, right? I think that's really important to mention because if you don't have good quality information, I think that's the most important thing. And what I started realizing is that, like, hey, there are some types of content that the people that are growing are making and others are not. And so I started making more reaction style videos because I saw people like my friend Dr. Ids, who grew from 0 to hundreds of thousands in a couple of months, and another guy that I follow, the Plant Slant, and the Food Science Babe, and all these people who have really massive followings, very simple videos, very educational, but they're just reacting to something. And I used to think it was like, oh, you have to debunk something. And then I realized it's not even about debunking, it's just reacting because sometimes it could be a positive video and say you agree to something. But I started realizing that, like, your audience, yes, they want education from you, but they also crave your opinion, right? Like, I have people message me stuff and they're like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I'm like, man, maybe I just share some of these videos and share what I think about it. Start including maybe a little bit more comedy in there, like cracking a joke here and there. And then really going hard after the biggest charlatans, right? People like Gary Brecka, people like Carnivore MD, that I don't know them personally, but I have a really hard time believing that they think they're actually doing the right thing. Because, for example, Carnivore MD, he's a doctor, like he's actually smart, right? Gary Brecka is not a doctor, but he also seems like a socially intelligent person. Like, I feel like a lot of these people kind of know that in many ways what they're doing is somewhat of a scam, and they have massive followings and they're making a lot of money. So when I started going hard after those people, people just really started liking the content, and like following grew after that, really.
Yeah, I'm the reactionary content, it's massive at the moment. And I personally have struggled with it only because I put myself in that person's shoes. And I think that's how I'm like, oh, I'd hate if someone did that to me. But I think it's just a lack of confidence that comes from a lot of people. I think there's probably people listening who are equally very intelligent, very smart. They see some of these people putting out terrible information essentially, and they're like, hey, I could maybe do that, but I don't have the confidence. Do you have any advice for that person? Like, what gave you the confidence to be able to just be like, hey, I'm just going to react. This guy's got loads of followers, whatever. They might come after me. It doesn't matter. I know this is the right information. I'm just going to put out there. Is there anything you found that helped with that? Obviously, Layne being an inspiration. He's been doing it
Yeah.
for ages.
Yeah. So Layne being an inspiration. Two, just like personality wise, I've always been a relatively confident person. So that's just innate in the sense that, like, if I believe something, I feel confident saying that thing. And I stand strongly behind the things that I believe. So I think that personality trait definitely has helped me. For people that aren't that way, two big pieces of advice, and I've shared this with a lot of friends and it's helped them a ton, because they're like, man, like, I just don't really feel confident calling somebody out. First off, you don't need to call out a person, right? Call out the information. You don't have to say anything about the person. You can even start off by saying, like, hey, this is not to call out the person. I'm not trying to be disrespectful towards this person. I just want to share my opinion on the information that they're sharing. I'm actually doing that right now with somebody. I was just writing some scripts before we got on this call with somebody who I respect in the field, and I don't think is a bad person at all. I don't think they're intentionally a scammer at all, but they said something that's somewhat ridiculous. And like, the first thing that I'm going to say in my video is like, hey, this is no disrespect to this person. I don't think their intent was bad. However, I want to share my opinion on this message. Right? That's a very respectful way of responding to a message. So focus on the message. Don't focus on the person. Two, it doesn't even need to be debunking something like I mentioned. It can be a positive response, right? Somebody who does a really great job of this, if there are some content creators listening, go check out the Plant Slant. Plant, like a plant, and then Slant, S-L-A-N-T. His name is Liam Fisher. He does this every single day. He'll just put up a video of somebody making a recipe, and then somebody commented and said, like, Liam, what do you think? So he puts up the video of this person making the recipe, and then he makes the recipe, and he's like, this is good. This is what I would change. It's super simple. It's reactionary content because that just does well at the moment. Oftentimes, I've made positive videos. I remember I made a video on this girl saying that she thinks the number one thing that helps people from a psychological standpoint with nutrition is not intentionally avoiding any particular foods, but instead focusing on, like, my philosophy essentially, right? Focusing on healthy behaviors, but giving yourself permission to eat things that you want whenever you want. And I thought that was a great video. And not a lot of people saw it because the person didn't have a large audience. So I wanted to give a platform to that person. I shared their video, and then I gave my perspective and mentioned why it was a good video and gave them credit in the comments. So you could make it very positive, right? It's just reacting to stuff just hits at the moment. I'm sure a year from now, it won't be doing the same way it's doing now. Actually, I've realized that since I started doing it 9 months ago, it still works, but definitely not nearly as well as it did when I first started doing it. So the landscape always changes. Before that, when I first started, Instagram carousels were killing it. And I remember doing a really in-depth educational carousel showing images of studies, like making it very visually appealing. And I was growing at first like hundreds of followers a day, just posting carousels. And there were people in the scientific field doing that as well. Like, people, do you follow Brandon Roberts? B-Rob. Yes. Yep. So he was a good example of that. He would do these little carousels and his page was growing. And then
the infographic Instagram, type of information.
Yep. Infographics. Yeah. And then Instagram changed. That no longer hit.
I've still been doing those.
Yeah. And here's the thing. People that want to win at social media, you need to change. You can't just like identify with a particular type of content and continue to do that. So the people that, because there are a ton of people that still just do infographics. That's fine, but you're not going to grow, right? Because it just doesn't do well. And then I realized it switched from that, and then like single image memes were hitting for a while. And I would make these memes about like my face when somebody says a low carb diet is the best, a stupid picture, and then the caption going into depth. Those started killing, and like I was growing a ton from doing those. And those stopped working. And then I was like, oh, now reels. And I was just doing educational reels. Those were killing. And then those stopped not doing as well. And then I started doing reaction videos, and those started doing well. It's just like, it always changes. You just need to pick up on the patterns.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
Yeah, I think that's so well said, and I don't want to derail this to become a like business podcast, because that's not that's not this podcast. But I do think there is a large chunk of the audience that's interested, me as well, because obviously I'm a content creator and I find it fascinating. But something I was interested in was, oh yes, this is where I was going. So for consumers of social media content, how can they decipher, like you said, the carnivore guy you mentioned, he's a doctor. How can they view his video and realize that it's not great information, or what is making, and how can they then view your video and be like, oh, that is the correct information? Do you have some advice for that person that is consuming content? Because I'm sure you get it, like, I don't know, videos sent to you and maybe you then debunk them because you're like, this is not great. And I mean, I don't have a PhD, I'm not a doctor, but I'll get sent videos from people who are, and people ask for my like opinion on it. I'm like, oh gosh, like I don't have the credibility in terms of educational background to say they're wrong, but they're wrong.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I want to mention that it is incredibly hard to do so if you are not educated in the field. Because unfortunately, and Layne talks about this often, the people that are the worst in terms of the information that they're sharing are the ones that actually come off as experts. And people like myself and others who are actual experts come off as non-experts, because there's a lot more uncertainty in the way that I speak compared to somebody like Carnivore MD or Gary Brecka, right? So first of all, the first thing to notice is lack of nuance. People who share bad information lack a ton of nuance, and oftentimes the message they're sharing itself isn't the worst. It may not be the most accurate. It's just applied to everyone in every circumstance always, and that's not true, right? So carnivore people, everybody should be carnivore and only eat meat. There's no nuance there, right? Can some people benefit from a carnivore or a meat-focused diet? Sure, there are some circumstances where an extreme elimination diet might help people identify sensitivities or allergies to particular foods. In those circumstances, it makes sense, and then you have to reintroduce food slowly. That's more nuance. That's not what does well on social media, right? So that's the first thing. If people lack nuance and they just make blanket statements, that's immediately a red flag. If somebody comes off as an expert on everything that you ask them about, that's immediately a red flag, right? Other things would be, I don't know, a lot of these people have like a very unique solution to a problem that like mainstream science doesn't have. Listen, there is no single person on this planet that is so smart that they have a unique solution to a problem that the entire scientific community has not been able to identify, right? And a lot of these people mask it as a conspiracy theory. So if there's somebody that sounds like a conspiracy theorist when it comes to the nutrition space, they're probably not the best source of information. Carnivores are always talking about how research is bought off by big agriculture and big food companies, and all of the research on fiber is actually incorrect because of the 7-country study by Ansel Keys or whatnot. And like it's just this like big conspiracy that if you don't know anything, it makes sense because it's logical.
Yeah.
But just because it's logical doesn't mean that it's accurate, right? So conspiracies, 1, lack of nuance. 2, Three is, what did I say was three? If they appear to be an expert on everything, right? For example, like Gary Brecka talks about nutrition, talks about exercise, talks about biohacking. So like different technologies that can improve health. Listen. And it might seem like these are grouped together because nutrition and exercise are both under health. But not only does he talk about nutrition and talks about exercise, he talks about them in different contexts too. Disease prevention. He's like, this nutrition, whatever, to prevent cancer and to not have autoimmune disease. And like, it's like, there are scientists that spend their whole life studying one nutritional intervention for one disease, and they are an expert on that thing. That is how expertise works. Experts are only experts in one very narrow topic, and an expert can have broad knowledge in many topics associated with that one narrow topic. But if somebody presents themselves as an expert on all of these topics, they are not an expert. That's really hard for people to understand. And that's why people like myself oftentimes don't come off as experts. Like, somebody asked me a question I don't know, and it's related to nutrition, I will just say, I don't know. And that happens often, right? Like, hey, I have this particular autoimmune condition. Should I eat this food? Dude, I don't know. I don't know, but I do have the skills to figure out whether or not you should, right? That's the difference. And so when somebody who doesn't know anything about nutrition or exercise science, and they hear somebody, a so-called expert, say, I don't know, or say, it depends, like, that adds uncertainty. That doesn't make them seem like an expert. But actually, the people who sound more uncertain are the actual experts because they understand context, they understand nuance, they understand all of the external variables that influence the question that you're asking, right? If it comes to training, and this will be a simple one. Is the bench press the best exercise for the chest? It depends, right? Like, what is your goal? Are you trying to hypertrophy your chest? Are you trying to get really strong at pressing? Does the bench press feel comfortable? Do you have discomfort when you bench press? What other exercises are you doing? How many times per week are you training your chest? How are you recovering? Like, there's so many variables, and I just threw things out that may or may not be relevant in that circumstance, but there are so many other variables that influence the answer to that question. So when you ask an expert a question and it's a simple question, you're almost always going to get an it depends, or I need more context. And like, that's just not a confident answer. So those are the main things I would look for. And then beyond that, if you do know somebody is an expert, or you do know somebody is not at all, and they're just, I love the word charlatan, look at their social circles, right? Like, I never promote something that Carnivore MD shares. I never promote something from Liver King or anything like that. If I ever do share something, it's making fun of it on my stories, right? So look at the social circles as well. People who are actual experts in an evidence-based field are going to interact and share content from other individuals who are also respected, because our credibility is on the line, right? My reputation's on the line. If I'm sharing something from Carnivore MD and saying, like, my good friend Paul Saladino, like, this is it's like, that's going to ruin my reputation with all my colleagues, right? And it's funny because I've had circumstances where people have asked me, like, why did you talk to this person, or why did you talk to that person? People that are not as quote unquote credible. And because I don't know, I have mixed feelings about this. So I was invited on Max Lugavere's podcast. Do you know Max Lugavere?
I haven't heard of him, no.
No? Okay. So he has a journalistic background, so he interviews people. His actual perspective on nutrition is pretty balanced. It's pretty good. His personal perspective. He also is somebody who is a little bit of a conspiracy theorist for sensationalism, like, oh, the government this, the government that. Like, his actual recommendations are very balanced, like eat fiber, eat protein, very balanced. But coming from a journalistic background and wanting to grow his business, he has the world's biggest charlatans on his podcast, and he doesn't push back at all. He just interviews them and lets them speak. That's his show. That's how he does it. And so he invited me on his show. And when I mentioned that I was going on his show, so he has people like Glucose Goddess and Dave Asprey and those types of people, right?
I'm glad you brought up Glucose Goddess.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
came up on a podcast that I did with Mike Israetel. He hadn't heard of her, but I got a bunch of information sent about her and some of her posts, and I was like, who is this woman? Sorry, continue. People who listen to the Mike Israetel podcast will understand that reference.
Yeah. So people were like, man, why would you associate with that person? And I was like, I'm given an opportunity to share my message with his audience, and his audience probably falls for a lot of these misconceptions that we're talking about. I'm going to take that opportunity 100 out of 100 times, right? I'm not necessarily bringing the person on my show and giving them a platform to spread their message. I'm being invited on their show. Similar experience recently. I was on Jillian Michaels' podcast, and
I do know her.
Jillian Michaels is someone who has said things before that aren't the most accurate. Now, somebody like Jillian, I actually respect and think very differently than somebody like Carnivore MD or Gary Brecka, because one, she doesn't necessarily position herself as an expert in the field, right? Two, she admits to the mistakes she's made. Like when we started our episode, she was like, we did a myth busting episode. We did like 3 big myths, we busted, whatever. And every time we started one, she's like, I've said these things before, and now I know I'm wrong. And actually, they didn't come from me because I'm not an expert. Like I just heard these things and I thought they were true, so I shared them. So although, yes, there is some wrong in that as well, like I don't think it's nearly as bad. And I don't necessarily dislike that type of person at all, right? But people are like, why would you talk to her? She said so many ridiculous things. It's like, yeah, we've all said ridiculous things, right? We've all said ridiculous things. So I think it also depends, like the context of that matters too, because if somebody's not positioning themselves as an expert, they're just trying to learn, they make some mistakes. You can tell that they're genuinely trying to do good. I don't fault them for making mistakes because we all make mistakes. The only people that I really don't like are the scammers.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm completely with you. This reminds me of someone like, I don't know, Layne Norton went on Joe Rogan's podcast, for example. Like it's a...
Like who? Sorry, it cut off there.
Oh, sorry. Joe Rogan. Layne went on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah.
So it's a very similar example where it's like how he's got the biggest platform to spread a really good message. And I think that very similarly with yourself. It's not like you're inviting them on and promoting them. It's like they're promoting you. So if anything, that's like I see that as a big win for sure.
Yeah.
And I do think that association things are really important. I think particularly for people listening to this podcast, like I take it with a large chunk of responsibility that I'm sharing whoever I'm interviewing their message. So I make sure, like, not that I'm the god of what's good information or whatever, but I take it to heart that I'm bringing on people and spreading their message. So I very much am making sure I do my background research and checking. So I would like to say, if people are listening, like check all the people that I've had on the podcast. You've got hundreds of people who are amazing educators in this space to kind of know and trust. And I think that's a great suggestion. Like that's the easiest one to go down, like see who they promote and who they know, like, and trust. But I also think, in addition to the things you laid out, which I think are amazing, and I completely agree that it's that nuance that then makes people sometimes not look like a expert. Like I think of Brad Schoenfeld, and he's always talking about if and maybe, and he's always putting these precursors in place to kind of make it sound like he's unsure, because he is unsure because he doesn't talk in black and white terms. But the only other one I would present, in addition to the ones you said, is if someone is presented with kind of, I don't know, different arguments or new evidence, that then they just, I don't know, they poo-poo it off, or they shy away from it, they delete or block. Like if they don't have the ability to communicate and have discourse, I think that's a big like red flag for me. Because I've seen someone, I think some of the audience might know, Eddie Abu. He's British, of course, so it makes me sad. But I've seen him be like, I'm not debating experts because they're, I don't know, it's all a conspiracy and they're the problem, and there's no point doing it. And I'm just like, how can people not see that and see straight through it?
Well, dude, because people also think very black and white. Eddie's a perfect example. I debunk of his videos, and I've made a couple of them. First off, the dude's just like rude. He told, can I curse on this podcast?
For sure.
Yeah. He told Layne he was going to fuck his mom. When Layne just like, when Layne told him that he was wrong about something, and he just like went off saying crazy stuff. So first off, he's just a rude person, or he says very rude things. And I've debunked a couple of his videos. Like I made one, and this is the type of thinking that is difficult to get across, man, because people think very simplistically. It's like he made a video saying, these are 2 eggs. They have about 12 grams of protein. This is a protein bar. I'm not sure if you saw the video that I made. He's like, this is a protein bar. This has 20 grams of protein. Or is it, this says it has 20 grams of protein. But and here's the thing, like all of these guys sprinkle a little bit of truth because they know a little bit, right? But then they make huge extrapolations based off the little that they know. And they're like, but what really matters is bioavailability. Bioavailability is how much you actually absorb. All of that is true. Now, here's the thing, guys. This protein bar has too many ingredients in it, so it's shit. This one, you get all 12 grams of protein. This one, you get whatever, right? Completely made up. So my reaction is just focusing on the term bioavailability and explaining that whey protein is actually the most bioavailable source of protein we can consume because it's easily digestible. Sometimes it's pre-digested. If you're having like a whey protein isolate, it's the bioavailability is extremely high. Eggs are also extremely high, but to say that whey protein is not because there's other ingredients is a silly thing to say. And bro, I have received hundreds of comments of people saying, how can you promote that sugary bar? I'm like, one, I'm not promoting the bar. Two, thanks, but I'll take the eggs over the protein bar any day. That's fine. I wasn't telling you not to. I would also take the eggs over the protein bar, by the way. I'm just saying that this is very bioavailable. Three, how could you say that protein bars are healthier than eggs? It's like, this is the thing. People like hear one thing. This is the perfect way to say it. You say one thing, but everybody hears something different, right?
Yeah.
Everybody hears something different. And that's the difficult thing to get through on social media, because I try to put a lot of time and thought into how I word things with videos. I actually script all my videos. So I write them out before to make sure that I'm saying what I want to say. And I reread them and I'm like, okay, I think this conveys the message well. I think I've chosen the right words. I've condensed my thoughts. I'm just talking about one thing. And I'm always surprised by what people have to say in the comments.
I did watch that one because I commented on it saying, Joey, you're clearly a supplement shill. And people didn't get my sarcasm, and I got a few people attacking me. Like, I was like,
oh, dude, the good thing is that the
joking.
people that defend me, like, really defend me.
Yeah, that would be
the
me.
loyal followers.
Like, it's absolutely mind blowing. And I think what you said there is really important, where they have like some truth, or like, it doesn't matter which way it is, but they have some truth in there, which kind of buys people in, and it sounds knowledgeable. But then they just chuck a load of extra stuff in there that I don't even know why they necessarily do it. Maybe it's because it's like a black and white message. Like for him in particular, his message is very black and white. Like if it's processed by any means, although I'm not sure he completely understands like the processing elements and the categorization of everything. I'm sure he doesn't, but it's like a very black and white message. Like it's almost like a paleo style of eating or something, I would imagine. And
yeah, because
people buy
even
into
fruit
that.
he's against. Because
He's against
sugar.
fruit. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but people, yeah, they just love that sort of thing. And I even saw it with him. He talked about like, there was I forget the doctor, he did white bread. And when you freeze it, you get that kind of more resistant starch. And so it lowers the glycemic index and everything. And he was just like, it's just shit. And it's just like, but, and you can't say what the scientist has described in terms of the freezing process and everything that hasn't occurred. You can't say that, but that's kind of what he's doing by doing that. And it's just simplifying things so far that it's giving like a very generic message, but it's taking us all the way back to tailing it back to the start of your journey here, that kind of very black and white, good and bad foods, poor relationship with eating. And I imagine that's what makes you so, like, I guess, inspired to react to this content, to kind of myth bust and to promote this healthy message, because I feel the same way. I feel very triggered when I see these messages, because I'm like, that takes me back to when I was like an unhealthy teenager with a poor relationship with food, not enjoying myself.
Yeah.
And I've kind of defeated that and got through it. And I just see someone like that promoting it to millions of people, and they just and I probably would have sucked it up at that time too. So I'm really appreciative of people like you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, man. And here's the thing, like, because this is something that people ask me all the time too. It's like, why do you care so much if, like, at the end of the day, some people are improving their health? And like, yeah, some people are, right? If you follow Eddie Abba's advice and you eat the way he recommends, you're probably going to improve your body composition. Your health markers might improve, right? I say might because, again, it's context specific, right? Now here's the thing. You could also improve your health equally and have some ice cream every once in a while because you enjoy it, right? And it doesn't have to be so miserable, and you don't have to have this weird anxiety about food, because that's the secondary effect that people don't understand. It's like you develop these really weird feelings with food. I'm not going to say it's a eating disorder or disordered eating, because I think it's not, right. I don't think when I was younger I had an eating disorder. And I think that minimizes people that actually have eating disorders. but you get this like feeling of not being at ease almost all the time because you eat multiple times every single day. So food is on your mind a lot. And when you start categorizing foods as foods that you can eat and foods that you cannot eat, it just develops this really weird feeling when you are in situations where you eat the food that you can't eat. It makes you feel uncomfortable. For some people, again, everybody's different too, right? Because for me, it didn't have a huge impact, but for some people it does, right? That is how some people develop eating disorders, and that is how it can get worse for some people. So I don't want to minimize that either. It's just like these people can just do better. And two, if you're not an expert, like, why are you positioning yourself as an expert? I actually, and I've talked about this a number of times too, I have no issue with people that just share what they do. I have an issue with people who share what they do and then try to rationalize it with science that does not exist, right? So, for example, um, I actually haven't been listening to it a lot lately at all, but I used to listen a lot to Mark Bell's podcast, mainly because I like the personalities. Like they make me laugh, it's entertaining. I really enjoy his podcast. One thing I always respected about Mark Bell and the guys that he does the podcast with is the way they talk about nutrition and stuff and exercise. They literally say, this is not scientific. This is just what we did and this is what works for us. We mainly eat meat because it's easier for us to control our calories and like we just feel good this way. Maybe try it out and see if it works for you. He's never said fiber is bad for you. You shouldn't eat plants. Like those things are trying to kill you and meat is the only food, because the messaging really matters, right? So if somebody's just like, hey, I eat this way, it's not the most scientific way of eating, but like I enjoy it and it's helped me out, maybe give it a try. Dude, I have no issue with that at all, right? I'm not the type of person that's going to nitpick here and say like everything you share must be perfect and accurate, because like that's just not my personality. And I think it's stupid to be that way in the first place, because everybody inherently says things that are incorrect, right? So I think you got to be a little bit humble with that. But it's for me the really big thing that bothers me is when people don't know stuff and they position themselves as expert and then they try to discredit actual experts, and it's like you don't know what you're talking about. That's probably the number one thing that bothers me.
Yeah, it's kind of that whole this worked for me, it works for everyone type of approach. And as a coach, you know that's not true. Like
Yeah.
the way you eat, the way you train, you can't just give it to all your clients and suddenly they get the same results as you, or even good results is going to work for some, not for others. Everyone has to find their own. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's ego or what have you. And I do agree with you completely that if someone's just like, hey, this worked for me, like it doesn't matter almost what they say. They're just talking about their experience. They're not trying to then tell everyone else, you must also do this, which so many people unfortunately take it upon themselves to then go do that.
Yeah, it's the you must do this and this is why, right? It's like, hey, this worked for me. Try it out. No problem with that at all, even if it's ridiculous, right? Because they're not trying to rationalize it through science, which is the crazy part. And I quickly want to touch on a couple things here, because when we were talking about before, you were asking me like, maybe we'll go into like what the myth that bothers me the most is, right? Thing is that there are so many, it's hard to address. There's way too many when it comes to nutrition. Every day I see something different. Every day I see something different, dude, that I haven't heard before. I'm like, whoa, this is a new one, right? And sometimes they're even hard to debunk because like, I don't even know where to start with this. Like, how do I debunk this, right? This one lady, she's really popping off on Instagram right now. Her whole thing is insulin as well. She's the primal body is her Instagram. Another one, guys, if somebody's Instagram handle is the name of their diet, not good, right? If and also like the term primal is really popular now too, like primal, ancestral, this or that. Like, guys, our ancestors lived to freaking 35. Like, why would we want to be doing the exact same things? They didn't take any medicine. They didn't go to the doctor when they broke their leg. Like, if you're gonna try to live primally, do everything that our ancestors did, not just nitpick this and that, right? Anyways, aside from that, this lady's whole thing is sugar and insulin. And she made this one video that I debunked, and she was like, if you ever have cravings after your meals for chocolate or sweets, it's because your insulin is high. And I was like, I know that's not true. I don't even know how to start to debunk that specific claim, right? And so what I did was go through the comments and stuff, and like There was one lady who's like, listen, I'm carnivore, because she follows her. She's carnivore. She's like, I'm carnivore and I still have cravings after I eat. And my insulin's really low. I think it's more behavioral. And I'm like, exactly. We have cravings for a number of reasons. And insulin being high is not one of the reasons. But anyways, I think what's helpful for the listener here to share is maybe the top couple of things that you should actually focus on, right? Uh, the person listening trusts what I'm saying. Hopefully by now they do. But when it comes to nutrition, make it as simple as possible. I think of nutrition as a pyramid, variables that matter. And we're talking here specifically from a body composition standpoint, not from a health standpoint, even though the two are very much related. If your body composition improves, if you have excess adiposity, your health will improve. There are other nutritional changes that you can make around specific food choices to improve specific health outcomes like cardiovascular health or glycemic regulation. That's not what we're going to talk about here, just body composition. Think of nutrition like a pyramid. There are three main variables. Most important at the bottom, least important up top. Most important being energy balance. In the middle being food choices, being nutrient timing. Okay. And now there are many external variables that influence those. We're just talking about nutrition here, but for example, like your environment will influence those variables, right? Your work schedule, your culture, your habits, like a lot of these things will influence those variables. But objectively, those are the main three nutrition related variables that really matter. Energy balance, meaning calories in, calories out. If you don't believe that and you think carbs make you fat or simple carbs are bad, let's not even think about science. Just look at Asian populations and rice they eat. And they're extremely healthy, right? Incidences of diabetes are substantially lower than in the US, and they eat simple carbs. And incidence of all chronic diseases are lower as well. So it's not carbs. It's not carbs, right? It's energy balance. Now we have a lot of calorically dense foods in the US, which make it easier to go calories, but at the end of the day, it comes down to energy balance. Like that's the overarching principle. And now people have some misconceptions there. I eat a low calorie diet and I don't lose weight. Energy balance doesn't mean that you eat a lot or a few calories. It's the relationship between energy expenditure, right? Things like hormones, because people talk about hormones. It's not calories, it's my hormones. No. Hormones are part of the equation. Hormones can influence both energy intake and energy expenditure because some people have dysregulation and hunger related hormones, so they eat a lot more, right? They don't feel satiated the same way somebody like you and I might. So it influences energy intake. The flip side is also true. There are hormones that influence energy expenditure, like your thyroid hormone, like your sex hormones. If those are out of whack, they will energy expenditure. If you have low thyroid function, you can eat very few calories and not lose weight because your energy expenditure is also low because your basal metabolic rate is low. So all of these external factors are part of the equation of energy balance. If we go a step further, we have food choices. Food choices are incredibly important, but food choices do not inherently affect body composition the way calories do. Food choices in many ways, from a body composition perspective, are incredibly important because they regulate how many calories you consume because they influence hunger and satiety regulation and appetite, right? So highly processed foods are not inherently fattening. They're just very easy to overconsume. You can eat 1,000 calories of ice cream or chips. Good luck eating 1,000 calories of oranges, spinach, or chicken, right? You can do it, but you're going to be way more satiated. So food choices in many ways are very important because they influence energy intake, right? They influence how satiated you feel. If you mainly eat whole foods, if you go from a highly processed diet to mainly whole foods, the reason you lost weight is not because these natural foods make you lose weight. It's because you eat less when you eat whole foods, period. This is very well documented. And now if we go a step above that, and I say that nutrient timing is at the top because I think it's the last thing people need to worry about, but I wouldn't say like one is more important than the other with food choices and nutrient timing. I think they go hand in hand because there's some really good research showing that the way that people spread out their meals throughout the day seems to play an impact on body composition as well. So when it comes to nutrient timing, the main things I tell people are minimize, first off, try to eat the majority of your food earlier in the day, right? So this spits in the face of intermittent fasting for people that just like fast in the beginning of the day. If you want to intermittent fast at the end of the day, but you don't have to fast. So eat more earlier in the day. The research clearly shows that people that eat more of their food earlier in the day have greater energy expenditure, which helps with energy balance, right? Try to have a regular meal schedule. Eat at similar times every day. That helps regulate hunger. That's well documented as well. And minimize eating food late at night, ideally 4 to 5 hours before bed for two reasons. One, It can affect sleep quality, and we know that poor sleep influences hunger rate and satiety regulation the following day. There's really good studies showing that sleep restriction increases hunger the next day, even when calories are equated. So two people that eat the same amount, same foods, the person who doesn't sleep well will feel hungrier. Damn, dude, this is a master class. I should package this up. And the last thing I was going to say with regards to limiting food at night is that just from a common sense standpoint, we don't make the best food choices at night, right? Like if we're hanging out at the end of the day, relaxing, watching a little Netflix, like you're not going to pick up a grilled chicken breast and a salad. Not that you have to eat that anyways, but like an example of a healthy meal, that's not what you're going for. Probably going for some snack food, which again isn't inherently bad, but adds to your caloric load. And, the opposite of that, when's the last time you had like potato chips or maybe some ice cream for breakfast? Probably not that often, right? You tend to make healthier food choices in the morning. So those are the main things that I would say everyone should focus on first and foremost when it comes to nutrition. Everything else is just noise.
Really well stated. And it is simple when you look at it that way. Like
It's
that's
very
a
simple.
lifestyle. And I like the kind of ordering there and also recognizing that the stuff above also influences the stuff below, because I think sometimes you can go, I imagine you might do this with habits, but if you go for like a wholesome, minimally processed diet, high protein, lots of fruit and veg, that automatically is going to reduce the calories
Exactly.
in for sure. Again, like you said, have more calories earlier in the day. That tends to increase energy expenditure through the day. So,
Yeah.
and then, like you said, sleep is better. Maybe if they aren't eating as much near to bedtime. Chrononutrition is a really interesting subject. Like I've had a few people on to
Yeah.
talk about that, and it's undervalued, I think, with a lot of people.
Yeah. I haven't gone super in depth in literature on that. Honestly, and this is one thing that I want to get back to, I haven't been going super in depth on literature recently at all because I've been so busy with other stuff. But yeah, when it comes to that hierarchy, it's not that one is more important than the other. It's that the ones above influence the ones below, right? Nutrient timing will influence your food choices, will influence how much food you eat. Food choices will influence energy balance. So, perfectly said, they influence each other, right? Um, Not the other way around. Like calories in don't necessarily influence nutrient timing, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great way of putting it.
And I think we're getting to a good kind of wrap up point, because I think that was a great ending. But you did mention a few times your members area and kind of that group coaching format that you're running. I know it's
Yeah.
called the Fit for Life Academy. So if people, you kind of mentioned it at the start, and I want to remind people of that and maybe where they can head for that. And obviously your social media handle
Sure.
would be great.
Yeah. So first and foremost, rather than promoting the membership itself, I encourage people to download my free ebook. Um, you're going to get emails from me if you download my free ebook, but I feel confident that the things that I put out are actually having a positive impact. So I just shared, head over to our website, lifeacademy.health/blueprint, and you can download my free ebook. And essentially the ebook is the framework that I try to teach my clients when it comes to health and overall fitness. The name of my company is Fit for Life Academy for a reason. I'm not promoting just bodybuilding. I'm not promoting a specific diet. A certain type of lifestyle that's healthy and helps you develop a fit physique, whatever that means, because it means something different for everybody. And in the ebook, I really talk about like the main 5 pillars that I think are really important: mindset, habit formation, nutrition, lifestyle and environment, and then physical activity. And the physical activity is talking about hypertrophy training specifically. So highly encourage you guys to download that completely for free. That's how you can like dabble in my content besides social media, that I've actually put time into writing and like making it in a way that makes sense versus like a reaction video, right? For those listening, I'm not sure when this episode comes out, but if it comes out before the end of the month, I'm going to be putting together a masterclass talking about these things as well, and that's free to join. If you download the ebook, you will get an email inviting you to register for the masterclass. So you could just download the ebook and you'll get that. And lastly, for those that do want to check out the membership, it's just fitforlifeacademy.health/membership. So /blueprint ebook /membership. We're opening the doors again on the 1st of May. And as I mentioned earlier, the membership is all around really the stuff that we've been talking about on this episode. So you get workout plans that are tailored to you, hypertrophy focused tailored workout plans, because again, we are biased towards hypertrophy training. I state that at the beginning. I think everybody should really be prioritizing resistance training with an emphasis on building muscle for a number of reasons. And then 2, you get enrolled in our healthy habits program. All of these healthy habits that we've been talking about, you develop them over time in a systematic way. And then 3, and I think this is where the biggest value of the membership is, well, first off, you get access to our app to track all this stuff, but our community. And I can't emphasize how important that is, because I've seen how valuable it is for people. Like, having a community of people that are doing the same thing as you are helps you shift your identity, and identity shift is incredibly important, right? We talked earlier about, like, I don't follow a diet. I eat in a healthy fashion. That is an identity shift, right? And I think community is an integral component of that. And we do live coaching calls right now once weekly, but we're trying to get to the point where we do them daily as we grow our team. And that's so important, because if you just buy a course or buy a program and you start to follow it, you're going to have road bumps. You're going to have questions. That's where the coaching calls come in. That's where the community calls come in. You have access to an expert to discuss some of these things. So if you want to check it out, that's where you can check it out. If you want to check out my social media, it's at Dr. Joey Munoz, Dr.Joey and my podcast, the Dr. Joey Munoz Show, because I'm not original enough to think of something super clever like Revive Stronger.
Definitely not clever. That's a long story where that came from. Yeah. But thank you so much for all the links and everything and talking through that. I'll definitely make sure they're linked below. I've definitely seen those. I know I've got access to those, so I'll make sure they're in the description so people can get hold of them. This will probably come out after you've done the webinar, but if people sign up to your email list, when you do the next one, assuming there is another one, they can get involved with that. So definitely sign up to that email list, guys. And Joey, thank you again for coming on and taking the time. I think this will go down really well, and I'm sure I'll have to bring you on again. So thank you, and thank you guys for listening.
Awesome, man.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.